The day I came home from the hospital after my appendix surgery, my husband was not there. Not stuck in traffic, not on his way, not even running late with a good excuse. He was in Nashville. I found out because I called him from the discharge nurse's station, still in a paper gown, my side stitched up and pulling every time I tried to sit straight, and he picked up on the third ring with noise in the background, music, laughter, the unmistakable clink of glasses, and said, "Hey, you're out already? That's great, babe. Can you grab an Uber? I'm kind of in the middle of something." Kind of in the middle of something. I had been in the middle of something too. Emergency surgery at 2 in the morning, alone in an ER while he was 3 states away at his college roommate's bachelor party that he had promised me. Promised, with his hand on my shoulder, and that smile I used to trust completely. He would skip if anything happened. Something happened. I stood at the discharge desk with a plastic bag of my belongings in one hand and my phone in the other, and I did not cry. I was too tired to cry. I just said, "Okay," and hung up and asked the nurse if she could call me a car. Her name was Rosemary. She had silver streaked hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she looked at me for a moment before she said, "Honey, is there anyone I can call for you?" I thought about it, and then I called my father. His name is Edwin. He is 61 years old, retired from 30 years as a civil engineer, and he has never once in my life made me feel like I was an inconvenience. He picked up on the first ring. "Dad," I said, "I need a ride." He did not ask questions. He said, "What's the address?" He was there in 22 minutes. He walked into that hospital in a fleece jacket and his old New Balance sneakers, and when he saw me standing by the automatic doors with my little plastic bag, something passed over his face, something quiet and controlled. The way my father has always handled things that make him furious. And he just put his arm around me and said, "Let's get you home." In the car, he asked only one thing. "Where is he?" "Nashville," I said. My father nodded slowly. He kept his eyes on the road. He did not say another word about it for the rest of the drive. "My name is Sophie. I am 32 years old. I was married for 4 years to a man named Fletcher, and I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I did not go into that marriage naive. I was not young and reckless and blindly in love. I was 28. I had a master's degree in healthcare administration. I was running operations for a mid-sized medical billing company in Columbus, Ohio. I had my own apartment, my own savings, my own car. I thought I knew exactly who I was marrying. Fletcher was charming in the way that certain men are charming. Effortlessly, instinctively, without ever seeming to try. He remembered the names of waiters and the birthdays of acquaintances. He laughed easily. He was generous with compliments. When we first started dating, he made me feel like the most interesting person in whatever room we were in, and I mistook that for love, when really it was just a skill he had, the ability to make people feel chosen, right up until the moment he chose something else. We married in September. Small ceremony, backyard of my parents' house in Westerville, 40 guests, a string quartet my mother found on Craigslist. That was actually wonderful. My father walked me down the aisle between 2 rows of white folding chairs and whispered, just before we reached Fletcher, "You can still run." He was joking. I laughed. I should have asked him if he meant it. The first 2 years were fine. More than fine, sometimes. We bought a house in Clintonville, my down payment, my credit score, my name first on the deed, though we went through the whole process together and I did not think much about that at the time. Fletcher was in sales, medical devices, and he traveled a lot, which I understood because I also worked long hours and we had both agreed before the wedding that we were career people, that we did not need to be in each other's pockets, that independence was healthy. I believe that. I still believe it, actually. Independence is healthy. What is not healthy is what was underneath the independence I gave Fletcher. The slow, quiet way he let me carry everything while he moved freely, unencumbered, in the world we had built together on my foundation. I paid the mortgage. My income was higher and more stable, and we had agreed, again, early, openly. This seems like a rational adult conversation at the time, that it made sense for my paycheck to cover the house and utilities, And his income would go towards savings and travel and investments. His words. He had a plan, he said. He had some ideas about a portfolio. He had a buddy from college who knew a guy. I want you to sit with that sentence for a moment. He had a buddy from college who knew a guy. I should have ended the marriage right there at the kitchen table in 2023 when he said those words. But I didn't, because I loved him. And because I am the kind of person who gives people the benefit of the doubt, and because I thought, he's a grown man. He can manage his own money. He could not manage his own money. The appendix rupture happened on a Tuesday in March. I had been having pain on and off for 3 days, the kind you convince yourself is a pulled muscle or bad takeout. And then, at 1 in the morning, it stopped being ignorable and I drove myself to the ER. Because Fletcher was already in Nashville. The bachelor party had started that weekend, and I did not want to be dramatic. The surgeon told me afterward that I had waited a little longer than I should have, that another few hours and it could have been significantly worse. She said this in a very calm, clinical way, which is how surgeons tell you that you almost died. I texted Fletcher from the pre-op area. I said, emergency surgery, appendix, at Riverside. I'll be okay, but I wanted you to know. He replied 11 minutes later with, oh no, feel better. Call me when you wake up. Call! A prayer hands emoji. I remember staring at that emoji on the ceiling of the OR suite in those last seconds before the anesthesia pulled me under, and thinking, that is who you married. That is who he has always been, and you have just been too busy to see it clearly. I woke up 12 hours later in a recovery room with a nurse named Rosemary and no husband, and I was in pain, and I was alone, and I was 32 years old, and I was done. My father did not push me. That first day home, he helped me to the couch, set me up with a blanket and the remote, made me a bowl of tomato soup from the can because that is the only thing he knows how to make, and sat in the armchair across from me while the afternoon light moved across the living room floor. Do you want to talk about it? He asked. Not yet, I said. Okay, he said. And he turned on the History Channel and we watched a documentary about the Transcontinental Railroad in companionable silence, and that was exactly right. That was exactly what I needed. Fletcher came home 2 days later. He had stayed for the rest of the bachelor party because, as he explained it, the flights were expensive to change and he had already paid for his portion of the Airbnb, and I was fine. I had said I was fine, and he had checked in by text every day. He had 3 texts, 3 days, all varying versions of how are you feeling. He walked in with a Nashville Predators t-shirt for me. I do not follow hockey. And a sheepish grin and said, come on, Soph. Don't be like that. I was sitting at the kitchen table. I had my laptop open. I had spent the previous 48 hours, when I was not sleeping, doing something very specific and very deliberate. And I was not in the mood. Like what? I said. You know. He pulled out a chair, spun it backward, sat down with his arms crossed over the back the way he always did. That posture I used to find so attractive. Mad. I'm not mad, I said, and I meant it. I had moved through mad sometime around day 2. I was somewhere much calmer and much more irreversible. I want a divorce. He blinked. I watched his face cycle through surprise, then a short flash of something that might have been panic, then, because he was Fletcher, because this was how he handled everything that threatened him, he settled into a kind of practiced ease, leaned back in the chair, and said, okay, I think you're still recovering and you're emotional, and we should talk about this when you feel better. I feel fine, I said. I spoke to an attorney yesterday. Her name is Catherine. She's very good. That was when the ease cracked a little. Here's the thing about Catherine. My father found her. My father, who had said nothing, pushed to nothing, just sat in my living room watching railroad documentaries and making canned soup. My father had spent 30 years working in civil engineering contracts, and he knew people. And one of those people was a woman named Catherine, who had been doing family law in Columbus for 25 years and had a reputation, apparently, for being extremely effective. She was extremely effective. Before we file, Catherine told me, in her office on the 15th floor of a building downtown, with a view of the Scioto River behind her and a legal pad in front of her. I need you to gather everything. every account, every document, every financial record you can access. So I did. I had always been the one who filed our taxes. I had always been the one who managed the household accounts. Fletcher handled his own money, his income, his investments, his portfolio with the buddy's guy, and I had respected that boundary so completely that I had never once looked closely at the details. I looked now. What I found over those 2 days on my laptop at the kitchen table took my breath away in a way the surgery had not. Fletcher had not been building a portfolio. Fletcher had been borrowing. A personal loan here, a cash advance there, a balance transfer on a credit card I did not know existed, and every single one of those accounts listed our home address. Several of them listed me as a co-applicant. My name, my address, my credit. I had not signed anything. I had not agreed to anything, but my name was on 3 different loan applications, including one for $40,000 that had been submitted 8 months ago when Fletcher had sat across from me at this exact table and told me the investment portfolio was really coming along. I called Catherine. She said, "Don't touch anything. Don't confront him yet. Get me copies." I got her copies. Fletcher had no idea. He spent that week being contrite in the way that men like him are contrite, bringing home flowers, offering to cook, suggesting a weekend trip to put all of this behind us. He was so confident in his own charm, so certain that this would resolve itself the way everything always resolved itself, that he did not think to check what I might be doing while he was at the grocery store buying peonies. My father came over every day. He did not say much. He helped me organize the documents into folders, printed everything out at the library because he did not trust scanners, and then drove me to Catherine's office and waited in the lobby with a crossword puzzle. On a Friday afternoon, 3 weeks after I had come home from the hospital, Catherine filed. That same afternoon, a process server arrived at Fletcher's office. He called me 11 times between 4:15 and 5:30 p.m. I sent every call to voicemail. I was at my parents' house by then, sitting at the kitchen table where I had eaten breakfast every morning of my childhood, and my mother had made actual food, not canned soup, real food, roast, chicken, and green beans, and my father was at the head of the table reading the evening edition of the paper, and it felt so steady, so entirely real, that I sat there and finally let myself cry. Not out of grief, exactly, out of something more like relief, the particular release of setting down something you've been carrying for a very long time. Fletcher did not handle it well. He hired an attorney, a man named something I have already forgotten, because he was not very good, and his first move was to claim an interest in the house. Our house. The house I had put my savings into, my credit, my name. He argued that 4 years of marriage constituted a shared asset, regardless of whose down payment it was. Catherine was not impressed. Ohio is an equitable distribution state, which does not mean equal. It means fair based on who contributed what and how. Catherine had documentation of every mortgage payment I had ever made, every utility bill in my name, every financial record going back to closing day. She also had the loan applications with my forged signature. That is what they were, forgeries. Fletcher had signed my name, or had someone sign my name on 3 loan applications. That is not a divorce issue. That is a criminal issue. When Catherine's letter arrived at his attorney's office outlining what we had found and what we intended to do with it, Fletcher's attorney reportedly asked for a recess. Fletcher called me that evening. He did not try charm this time. His voice was tight in a way I had never heard before, the way a person sounds when they have finally understood that they are not going to talk their way out of something. "Sophie," he said, "come on. We can figure this out." "I know we can," I said. "Catherine will be in touch." The divorce took 7 months. Fletcher did not contest the house. He could not, given the documentation, and he retained his own accounts, his own debt, and the Nashville Predators jacket he had bought himself on that trip. He was required to remove his name from all accounts associated with my address within 30 days. The 3 fraudulent loan applications were referred to the county prosecutor's office. I do not know exactly where that stands today. I know that Fletcher has a different attorney now, a criminal defense one, and I know that his buddy from college who knew a guy has become notably less available. I moved back into my house on a Thursday in October, My father helped me carry boxes. My mother repotted the plant on my front porch that had died while I was staying with them. Planted a new one, a rosemary actually. She thought that was funny. I thought it was funny. We laughed in the front yard for a while. My father set down the last box in the living room and looked around, at the empty spaces where Fletcher's things had been, at the walls that were just my walls now, at the light coming in through the window I had always loved, the one that faces east and fills the whole room in the morning, and he said, "Better?" "Yeah," I said. "Better." He nodded. He picked up his keys. He said, "Call me tomorrow." He meant, I am not going anywhere. He meant, you are not doing this alone. He meant everything my husband had said on a smaller, flashier scale and never delivered, condensed into 3 words and a look from a man in a fleece jacket and old sneakers who had driven 22 minutes without asking a single question, because I needed a ride. I want to say something to the women reading this, or listening, or however you found this story. I was not naive. I was educated and employed and self-sufficient. I had a good job and my own money and a house in my name. I thought those things protected me. They protected my assets eventually after the fact, but they did not protect me from choosing someone whose charm I mistook for character, whose ease I mistook for steadiness, whose promise to show up when it actually mattered, when the anesthesia was pulling me under in a hospital and I had no one in the building, turned out to be a thing he said, not a thing he was. That is the part that takes the longest to understand. Not the fraud, not the finances, not even the loneliness of waking up in a recovery room. The gap between who someone performs themselves to be and who they actually are when you are inconvenient. Fletcher was not a monster. He was something smaller and more common than that. He was a man who was very good at being loved and not very good at loving back. And I gave him 4 years to show me the difference before I finally let myself see it. My father, who has never once performed anything in his life, was there in 22 minutes. I think about that a lot. The rosemary plant on my porch is doing well. I have gotten back into running, which I stopped doing in the last year of the marriage because I was always too tired, and now I go out in the mornings before work and I come back and stand in my east-facing living room in the light, and I feel more than I expected to. Okay, not healed, not finished processing, not ready to make any large claims about what comes next. But okay. Solidly, quietly, genuinely okay. My father calls every day. He never says much. He asks if I ate, if I slept, if the heat is working. He is not a man who says I love you easily, but he drove 22 minutes in the dark to bring his daughter home from a hospital, and I think that is the same thing said in a different language, and I have become, in the last year, very fluent in it. If you are waiting for someone to show up for you, really show up, not with flowers bought out of guilt or texts sent between drinks at a bachelor party, but with their actual presence, their actual time, their actual self. I hope you have someone like him, and if you don't, I hope you find the courage to call someone who will come. I have thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened, not in a mystical way. I don't mean the universe conspiring or fate stepping in. I mean the plain, unglamorous version. The things we allow quietly over time tend to grow, and the things we ignore in someone's character don't disappear. They just wait for a moment, big enough to make themselves impossible to miss. Fletcher was never going to show up. Not because he was uniquely terrible, but because I had spent 4 years making it easy not to. I covered the mortgage. I managed the accounts. I handled the details. I told myself this was partnership, that we had different strengths, that not everyone expresses care the same way. All of that was true technically. What I didn't account for was that I had built a life so self-sufficient that I had accidentally made myself optional to the person who was supposed to choose me first. That is on me. Not the fraud. I didn't forge my own name on loan applications, but the years of carrying more than my share while calling it balance, I built that. And understanding that, really sitting with it, was the hardest part of the whole thing. Harder than the surgery. Harder than the divorce. What got me through was not anger, even though there was plenty of that. What got me through was deciding, somewhere in that hospital recovery room, that I was going to be someone who acts on what she actually knows, rather than what she wishes were true. That is the difference between intelligence and wisdom, I think. Intelligence is knowing something. Wisdom is finally letting that knowledge change how you move. My father didn't lecture me. He didn't say I told you so, even though he had, gently, in his own way, on the day he walked me down the aisle. He just showed up, with soup and silence and a crossword puzzle in the lobby, and that consistency, that utterly undramatic reliability, was the model I had been missing for what it actually looks like when someone values you. Moral character is not what people say in the good moments. It is what they do in the inconvenient ones. Fletcher failed that test completely, and if I am honest, I had seen smaller versions of that failure for years before the night I texted him from a pre-op bed and got a prayer hands emoji back. I just hadn't been willing to call it what it was. Resilience. Real resilience, not the kind you perform for other people, is the quiet decision to keep building after something falls. I went back to my house. I planted a new rosemary on the porch. I started running in the mornings again, not because those things erased what happened, but because they were true to who I am, and staying true to yourself after someone has spent years subtly convincing you that your needs are secondary is its own kind of discipline. I am still working on it, but I go to bed in my own house in a life that is entirely mine, and in the morning the east-facing window fills the whole room with light. That is enough. For now, that is more than enough.